the Ukraine war. In the most recent developments, Russian forces have increased their attacks in Donetsk using tanks, artillery and 40 airstrikes. Russia seems to have a growing advantage in military hardware thanks to help from North Korea and China and Iran. Jens Stoltenberg, NATO's Secretary General, today warned that it's amassed a large stockpile of missiles ahead of winter and is trying to hit Kiev's power grid and energy system to leave Ukraine in the dark and cold. Ukraine, on the other hand, is struggling to get the ammunition it desperately needs, and there's a perception that its Western backers, that's us, are now just waiting to see whether Donald Trump wins the US presidential election in a year's time and does a deal with Putin. Earlier today, an unnamed US State Department official said, "My expectation is that Putin won't make a peace or a meaningful peace before he sees the result of our election." So this is now a bloody and brutal race for time. Not long ago, it seemed to be one that Ukraine was winning. I'm afraid that is no longer so. What does it mean for Ukraine and the rest of us? I am joined now by General Sir Richard Shirreff, the former NATO Deputy Supreme Commander for Europe. General Shirreff, very good to see you there. I don't know whether you thought I was being too gloomy or alarmist, but there does seem to be an awful lot of worry coming out of Ukraine that they're simply not getting the shells and the missiles they need to repel the Russians effectively over the winter. And meanwhile, the sort of Russian armaments machine has tooled up in a fairly impressive way.
I think you're being very realistic, and I'm delighted that you're putting this very, very important story back right up where it needs to be, because it's existential for the Euro-Atlantic community, as it is, of course, existential for Ukraine. Point number one, though, I don't think Ukraine is going to give up in any way, shape or form. Ukraine will not be defeated in the sense that they're going to give up and the Russians break through. That's not going to happen. Equally, Ukraine is not in a position, I think, as we saw with General Zaluzhny writing in The Economist a couple of weeks ago. He described the situation there as a stalemate. He described the situation where Ukraine has not got the capability to actually break through and achieve decisive military defeat of Russia, which it has to do if it is to achieve its military objectives. And the so what out of all this is that it is absolutely incumbent on NATO, on the West, on Ukraine's allies to continue to give, or not just to continue to give, but to ramp up the capabilities needed for Ukraine to do the job.
And I suppose the problem with that is that so many of Ukraine's allies are looking over their shoulders at the United States and wondering whether a Trump administration would, as I said, do a deal with Putin and end the war, and asking themselves, how much investment do we want to put into our arms manufacturing to help Ukraine now if it's all going to be for nothing?
Well, I think the main problem right now, frankly, is that Western arsenals have been so significantly depleted by the amount of artillery shells, tanks, armored infantry, fighting vehicles, artillery pieces, long-range precision missiles, etc., that have been given to Ukraine. And we do not have the industrial base to replace them. And in order to have that industrial base to replace them, we need to see moves, frankly, to a war economy, to turn out shells in much greater quantities. We need to be giving arms manufacturers, manufacturers of ammunition and explosives, long-term projects. Because frankly, if you're running a business, you need to know that you've got, in order to tool up the capabilities to produce ammunition, etc., you need to know you've got a long-term plan. And I don't think we've seen that long-term plan or strategy yet from our governments.
But, Sir Richard, we are a long, long way away from that kind of industrial war economy, aren't we? I mean, the Russians, under an autocracy can divert material and divert resources to the relevant factories. The Russians can put up huge numbers of conscripts for a long time. We can't, and we haven't.
We have got to see, we've got to recognize, as I say, this is critical for transatlantic and Euro-Atlantic security. It's critical for Britain's security, because our defenses don't start at the White Cliffs of Dover. They start at the borders of NATO. And Ukraine is actually fighting on behalf of NATO, frankly, against a Russia that is not going to give up, that wants to rebuild a second Russian empire, that wants to swallow up Ukraine as an integral part of Russia once again. And once they've done that, it'll continue to turn its attention not only to Moldova, to Georgia, but to those regions which it believes belongs to Russia, such as, for example, the Baltic states. So yes, of course, we're not seeing anything like that at the moment. And Russia has been able to do that. Russia has received over 1 million shells from North Korea since August. It's ramping up its capabilities. And there is this and of course, it continues. It has lost huge numbers of its young men. 300,000 killed or maimed is one report. They could lose another 300,000. Putin doesn't care about that. What he does care about is not losing.
So, what should British and American and European leaders be doing now that they haven't been doing before? What should Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden and President Macron and Mr. Scholz be doing in order to ensure that the shells, the precision-guided missiles, the tanks and so forth, which take a long time to actually build and produce and deliver, actually carry on coming into Ukraine? Because this strikes me as being quite a serious situation now.
It is a serious situation, because unless Ukraine has the capabilities to defeat Russia, what we will see is a long-running war of attrition. Think Iran-Iraq war of the 1980s. On Europe's eastern borders. Ukraine can't accept that, and Europe can't accept that. So what should they be doing? Number one, of course, is actually put their money where their mouth is. We've had a lot of rhetoric about we will do everything to support Ukraine to do what needs to be done. It's not being done. Number two is to think strategically. Think strategically about what is the desired end state? What do we want? What is the goal? What is the vision? And then put together a strategic plan that puts together the resources and the methods of achieving that plan. What we've seen thus far is incrementalism. We've seen a drip, drip, drip on a bilateral basis between nations and Ukraine rather than as an alliance. And until the alliance thinks strategically, then we won't be able to give Ukraine the support needed.
And finally, General, can I ask you to address, as it were, a fictitious person who looks at Ukraine and says, do you know what, in the end, I don't really care that much about what happens to Ukraine. And let's suppose that we are both wrong and Russia is able to break through either this winter or next winter or at some point. Can you explain to that fictitious person what the consequences of that would be here in Britain?
Exactly. Well, I would tell that fictitious person that Ukraine's defence is critical to UK defence and British defence and the lives of British soldiers and other alliance soldiers. Because if Russia did break through, if Russia did achieve a defeat of Ukraine, there is no question Putin would go on and attack other nations, other countries. He has already said that the most appropriate security settlement for Europe is a new Yalta. That means what he's thinking of is that those countries which under Yalta were swept up by the Warsaw Pact, Poland, the Baltic states, of course, which were part of the Soviet Union, they were annexed by the Soviet Union. Putin thinks of them as his own territory, and he would undoubtedly have a go at the Baltic states. And if that happens, it means NATO is at war with Russia. And under collective defense, I would tell that fictitious person, that means that British soldiers will be fighting and dying to defend NATO. Do you want that? No. So stop Russia now.
Well, if that fictitious person wasn't convinced, then they're an absolute idiot. General Sir Richard Shirreff, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC tonight.